every NBA team's worst trade ever. There are plenty of NBA analysts, including FS1's Skip Bayless, who believe that the Kings' trade of DeMarcus Cousins to the Pelicans was among the worst in NBA history. It's certainly the worst trade Sacramento has made, and considering how historically bad the franchise has been, that's really saying something. Here's a look at the worst trade made by every team in league history. Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks traded Dominique Wilkins and a first-round pick to the Clippers in the middle of the 1993-94 season for Danny Manning. Nique was 34 and in the final year of his deal, but he still could play, and averaged 29.1 points in LA the rest of the year. Manning, meanwhile, left after that season to sign with the Suns, so Atlanta essentially got nothing in return for its aging franchise star. Honorable mention, the Hawks traded Bill Russell to the Celtics, yes, that Bill Russell, for Ed Macauley and Cliff Hagan. Boston Celtics. The Celtics selected seven-time NBA All-Star Joe Johnson with the 10th overall pick in the 2001 NBA Draft, but he played just 48 games in Boston before being traded to the Suns, along with Randy Brown, Milt Palacio, and a first-round pick, for Tony Delk and Rodney Rogers. Johnson currently is in his 16th NBA season while the rest of those players are long gone. Brooklyn Nets. The Nets attempted to contend for a title by acquiring Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, and Jason Terry and DJ White, from Boston in exchange for spare parts, Gerald Wallace, Chris Humphries, Marshawn Brooks, Chris Joseph and Keith Bogans, in 2013, but the draft picks Brooklyn included in the deal, 3 first-round picks, 2014, 2016 and 2018, as well as the right to swap first-round picks in 2017, mortgage the future, and are hunting the team to this day. Honorable mention, the Nets traded Julius Erving to the 76ers for cash in 1976. Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets selected Kobe Bryant with the 13th overall pick in the 1996 draft, but Bryant never played a game for the team. Charlotte sent him to the Lakers for Vlade Divac due to Bryant's unwillingness to play for the Hornets, and the rest, as they say, is history. Chicago Bulls. In 2001, the Bulls traded Elton Brand to the Clippers for Brian Skinner and the draft rights to Tyson Chandler. Brand already had proven himself to be the real deal by averaging 20.1 points and 10 rebounds in his first 2 years in Chicago, but the upside of Chandler was too tempting to resist. Chicago gave up on Chandler after 5 seasons, however, when he was just 23 years old. Cleveland Cavaliers. This one's a slight stretch, because it's tough to predict what a draft pick might turn into a year or more later. But the Cavaliers could have had James Worthy, if only they didn't trade their 1982 first-round pick to the Lakers 2 years earlier for someone named Don Ford, and a 1980 first-round pick that became Chad Kinch. Dallas Mavericks. Plenty of folks believe the Jason Kidd trade was the worst in Mavericks history, but that one returned Michael Finley, who played 9 years in Dallas and made the All-Star team twice. Trading Jamal Mashburn to Miami in 1997 for Sasha Danilovic, Kurt Thomas and Martin Muerzep was far worse. Denver Nuggets. Carmelo Anthony essentially forced his way out of Denver in 2011, and the haul the Nuggets received in return, Wilson Chandler, Raymond Felton, Danilo Gallinari, Timofey Mozgov, the Knicks' 2014 first-round draft pick, the Warriors' 2012 second-round pick, the Warriors' 2013 second-round pick and $3 million in cash, was probably more than the Knicks should have been willing to give. But small markets like Denver don't get a superstar like Melo very often, and all those spare pieces have done nothing to send the franchise in a more positive direction. The fact that the Nuggets have only been past the first round of the playoffs once in the last 22 years shows that they should have found a way to make things work with Anthony before being forced to ship him out. Detroit Pistons. The Pistons traded Chauncey Billups, pictured, and Antonio McDyess to the Nuggets for Allen Iverson early in the 2008-09 season, but the deal turned out to be fairly short-sighted. Iverson left Detroit at the end of the season, while Billups, who helped lead the Pistons to 4 straight Eastern Conference Finals appearances, continued to play at a high level for 4 more seasons. Golden State Warriors. The league was in a fragile state and still forming in 1965 when the Warriors traded Wilt Chamberlain, So it's hard to fault the franchise for making a financially motivated decision in such uncertain times. The 1980 deal that ended up sending Kevin McHale and Robert Parrish to the Celtics in exchange for draft picks that became Joe Barry Carroll and Ricky Brown, however, was unquestionably a complete disaster. Houston Rockets. The Rockets traded Moses Malone to the Sixers for Caldwell Jones and a 1983 first-round draft pick that became Rodney McGray. Malone led the Sixers to the title the very next season, and continued to lead the league in rebounding for 3 more years. Indiana Pacers. The Pacers traded Al Harrington to Atlanta for Steven Jackson, pictured, in 2004, and it wasn't necessarily regrettable from a talent perspective. But Jackson was a key member of the brawl that took place in November of that year, later dubbed the Malice at the Palace, which involved fans fighting with players and was a PR nightmare for the league for years to come. LA Clippers. The Clippers were desperate to unload the remaining 2 years of a contract that would pay Baron Davis $28.65 million, so much so that they included an unprotected first-round pick in the deal with the Cavaliers that netted Mo Williams and Jamario Moon. The Cavaliers ended up winning the draft lottery and selected Kyrie Irving with the pick in 2011. Los Angeles Lakers. The Steve Nash trade, which sent first-round picks in 2013 and 2015 and second-round picks in 2013 and 2014 to the Suns, looked so good on paper. The Lakers were assembling a team capable of contending for a title, and those picks wouldn't be of any consequence considering LA's presumably lofty place in the standings. But Nash suffered significant injuries that ended his career in his second LA season, and the Lakers are still reeling from the deal 5 years later. Memphis Grizzlies. In 2008, the Grizzlies traded Pau Gasol to the Lakers for Kwame Brown, Javaris Crittenton, Aaron McKie, the draft rights to Marc Gasol, 2 future first-round picks and cash considerations. Memphis fans may be happy with the deal now, but the reality is that the Lakers got 2 championships out of the deal, while the Grizzlies have yet to make a finals appearance. Miami Heat. The Heat traded Steve Smith and Grant Long to Atlanta for Kevin Willis in 1994. Willis was gone in the middle of the following season, while Smith averaged 18.6 points per game in his 5 years with the Hawks. Milwaukee Bucks. In 2003, the Bucks traded Ray Allen, along with Kevin Ollie, Ronald Flip Murray and a pick, to the Sonics for Gary Payton and Desmond Mason. Allen went on to have 7 more All-Star seasons, and even though Mason put together 3 solid seasons in Milwaukee, Payton was off to the Lakers the very next year. Honorable mention, Bucks traded Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to the Lakers for Elmore Smith, Brian Winters, David Myers and Junior Bridgman in 1975. Minnesota Timberwolves. In 2010, the Timberwolves traded Al Jefferson to the Jazz for 2 future first-round picks and Kosta Koufos. Jefferson had 5 more productive seasons as a starting center, while Minnesota ended up with little to show for the deal. New Orleans Pelicans. New Orleans traded Chris Paul to the Clippers in 2011. Paul forced the team's hand, but there's no question that a package of Eric Gordon, Chris Kaman, Al-Farouq Aminu and Minnesota's unprotected 2012 first-round pick wasn't enough for the league's best point guard. The team had originally agreed to a deal to send Paul to the Lakers, but then Commissioner David Stern shot it down because the package of Kevin Martin, Luis Scola, Lamar Odom, Goran Dragic and a first-round pick didn't include any young players, or enough draft picks to rebuild the franchise to his satisfaction. New York Knicks. Knicks fans rejected this 2013 deal as soon as it was announced. New York traded Marcus Camby, Steve Novak, Quentin Richardson and 3 draft picks, including a first-rounder, to Toronto for Andrea Bargnani, who struggled to stay healthy in 2 seasons with the Knicks while collecting more than $11 million per season. Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder really traded James Harden, and received only Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick in return for a player who's emerged as a perennial MVP candidate. The Thunder will tell you that Harden wouldn't have been content as a 6th man, or even in any type of a reduced role, and that finances tied their hands as a small-market team. But in hindsight, this was a disaster. Orlando Magic. The Magic traded Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis to the Thunder for Serge Ibaka last summer, but Ibaka already has been sent to the Raptors in a trade this season, and Orlando's assets are now unquestionably worse. Philadelphia 76ers. Charles Barkley demanded a trade at the end of the 1992 season and got it, with the Sixers sending him to the Suns, but a return of Jeff Hornacek, Tim Perry and Andrew Lang was hardly reasonable for the Hall of Famer, who would continue his all-star level of play for the next 5 seasons. Phoenix Suns. The Suns had too many disgruntled guards in 2015, so they made deadline deals in an attempt to right the ship. But sending Isaiah Thomas to the Celtics for nothing more than Marcus Thornton and the Cavaliers' 2016 first-round pick was a disaster. Thomas is second in the league in scoring this season and has the Celtics near the top of the standings in the East. Phoenix, meanwhile, is on track to miss the playoffs for a 7th straight season. Portland Trail Blazers. Clyde Drexler wanted to play for a contender in the final years of his career, and the Blazers granted his wish in the middle of the 1995 season. Portland sent him to Houston for Otis Thorpe and a couple of inconsequential draft picks. Sacramento Kings. There are plenty of reasons that the Kings decided to part ways with DeMarcus Cousins, and those same reasons are why they couldn't get teams to offer much in return. But New Orleans' package of Buddy Hield, Tyreke Evans, Langston Galloway and first and second round picks is not close to enough for a player with Cousins' talents. San Antonio Spurs. It's true, the Spurs actually made a bad trade once. Dennis Rodman's personality and contract demands at the time forced San Antonio's hand, but all they got in return was Will Perdue in the 1995 deal with the Bulls. Rodman continued to lead the league in rebounding for 3 more years on a Chicago team that won 3 straight titles. Toronto Raptors. The Raptors traded Vince Carter to the Nets in 2004 for Alonzo Mourning, Eric Williams, Aaron Williams and a couple of first-round picks. Carter remains perhaps the greatest Raptors player of all time, so the deal still stings for Toronto fans, even to this day. Utah Jazz. The Jazz traded Enes Kanter to the Thunder as part of a 3-team deadline deal in 2015, but received only Grant Drett, Kendrick Perkins, the rights to Tibor Bliss and a conditional first-round draft pick in 2017. Kanter may not have been a personality fit in Utah, but 2 teams, the Blazers and Thunder, were willing to sign him to a max contract that summer, which makes the return that Utah received that much more ridiculous. Washington Wizards. In 1998, the Wizards traded 25-year-old Chris Webber to the Kings for Mitch Richmond and Otis Thorpe. Richmond, 32, was coming off of a season in which he was the league's 4th leading scorer, but lasted just 3 years in Washington. Webber, meanwhile, became one of the best players in the league. He led the NBA in rebounding in his first season with the Kings, before going on to make 4 more All-Star teams. He also helped Sacramento to 8 straight playoff appearances, including a Western Conference Finals matchup against the eventual champion Lakers in 2002 that needed all 7 games to be decided.